Welcome to Be Cyber's The Art of Cyber, where we meet with people who are experts in the cyber industry and try to demystify some of the key points. And today we're joined by Brett Williams, Flashpoint's lead solution architect in the Australian Pacific region. Hey Brett, how's it going?
How you going, Karen? Good.
So, when a business falls victim to a ransomware attack, usually it's the final stage of quite a long process. And it's one that typically starts with compromised credentials. And now those terms are thrown around left, right, and centre, but most people don't actually understand what they are. So can you explain to us what are compromised credentials?
Well, essentially, it's your username and password who's been compromised, right? So you think about you log onto a website, log onto a service, you generally have a username, normally it's your email address and a password. And they can be compromised in various different ways. The most common way would be phishing. You receive an email, it takes you to a fake website, you start typing your username and password in and someone's captured it, right? There's, I guess, more sophisticated, types of methods like malware, where something gets deployed on your computer that starts monitoring your keystrokes or starts looking at your browser history, stealing passwords out of your browser, those type of places. And of course, there's the external breaches, right, where it's not necessarily your fault. You've logged onto a company's site and they have had a breach where the data has been siphoned from that site.
Right. So, but I mean, is it such a bad thing? I know you can go onto some sites like I've been pawned and it pops up and says, oh, yes, you were breached, in 2017.
Yeah.
Is it such a bad thing? Like, what can I do with my login credentials once I've got them?
Yeah, obviously motivations of the people using them vary from just people just being opportunists to see if they can log into whatever the service is with your details to, everything from stealing money, if it's a financial service, to maybe your Netflix subscription, right? Just those type of things, all the way to a bigger campaign of targeted phishing, targeted attacks, obviously, extortionist type scenario, pushing out ransomware and other things. So really, it's the first port, and one of the reasons it's one of the first ports of an attacker is it's the easy one, if to want to use a better term, right? If you think about an attacker, they've got various different tools in their toolbox, malware and sophisticated software. Reality is a lot of times it's easier to hack the human. Grab the email, grab the details, and then I'll go and find the remote access system, be it a VPN or Citrix or an RDP, and use that to log into the network. And then once I'm in the corporation, do whatever my outcomes is, steal data, ransomware, etc. So a lot of times the reason it's a bad thing is it's the easiest vector in some respects to get someone's credentials and then use it in a system that makes it also difficult to detect. If I'm logging into a legitimate remote access system using legitimate credentials, my defense systems may not detect that until it's too late, if I don't have the correct things. So, and of course, a public breach, those people reuse their passwords. We're creatures of habit, unfortunately. I'm a security professional. I don't. I practice as best hygiene as I can with passwords, but we reuse our passwords. So the likelihood of me attacking, an actor attacking one site to get to another is not uncommon, because the likelihood you've probably got the same password and username, right? So you might attack something simpler to go after something bigger.
Right. And, as I said, if we just use the idea of, you were breached back in, 2017 or something, how long do the credentials stay in circulation in the Badlands, so to speak?
Years sometimes. So there's a lot of reuse. So you'll see credentials from a breach that may be reused over and over again, because again, people don't change their passwords, people use their passwords. That's why it's really important to practice good password hygiene. Obviously, a more recent breach or something that's new and hasn't been seen before will fetch a higher price if it's been sold, right, or maybe used. So a lot of times we see them used in campaigns without being sold, and then they get sold once they've been used. You know what I mean? Like someone holds them because it's almost like gold. And then they get put into older dumps or older combo lists, as we call them, and get resold and what have you. So, and sometimes it's as simple just databases for sale, so people can do attacks like brute forcing. I want to go after a particular website. Give me hundreds of thousands of email addresses and passwords, so I can just play the lottery game of seeing if I can get in. So they do stay we've seen in circulation for years, but the higher value ones that are more unique don't last long and get bought and sold pretty quickly and have high prices.
Right. So do you know of any examples where this is happening in Australia?
Well, I think, it's fair to say that it's not country bound, right? Like credential theft is no one cares about your borders. Of course, it's happening here. It's happening a lot of places. In fact, if you look at even just the recent what's the breach disclosure reports from the Australian government, the mandatory breach disclosure reports, 68% of the attacks that we saw, in the first half of the year are related to credentials in some nature, phishing, stolen credentials, whatever. So that's shows you that most of those breaches that were notified to the Australian government had something to do with stolen credential. I think if you look at a recent one that came out, it was the ASX listed defence contractor, shipbuilder, Austal. Right, so that was a breach that occurred in 2018 from memory, and their data was stolen. Their data was put up on the listed forums for sale, and obviously as it goes through the investigation and what have you, the CEO, I think earlier this year, actually came out public in the press after the post-mortem and said, look, they traced it back to stolen credentials being sold. So that someone had somehow secured credentials to that company, put it up for sale, ACT bought it, and obviously then initiated the attack.
All right, so based on what you've said, I've got to clean up my password hygiene, which means I shouldn't use the same login and password on a continuous basis, so no daisy chaining. What are some other ideas that we can do to sort of harden the resilience, especially at a business level? What do you think we can do?
Like you're right, like hygiene and education is probably the two biggest ones to fight password or credential theft, right? So as employees or employers of employees, let's try make sure that they're not using their work emails. We see this all the time. I won't name various different public breaches that have occurred that have got nothing to do with businesses. Even just normal services where people are using their work email address, and again, creature of habit, most likely their same password they might use for work. So that's obviously becomes a vector for the business, because suddenly what I thought was secure because it was all corporate details is now actually potentially in a public website, right? So obviously that's number one, don't reuse passwords. Try to avoid using your work email address on sites that aren't work related is probably thing. And I think the other way where we're starting to see a trend is that visibility. You mentioned things like Troy Hunt's service, Have I Been Pwned, and others, and Flashpoint also offers this service. And that's getting visibility. There's so many of these. We probably add 10 to 20, 30 breaches a day or data sets a day with stolen credentials in it. That's really hard for an organization to keep up with. You want to know about it before it becomes an issue. So being able to see the credentials before they're sold, by various means, being able to act on it, rotating your passwords, getting that data and doing something with it makes it really important. And it allows your security team or your IT team to prioritize. If you see you've got stolen credentials and the password's relatively new, you might want to reset that password. Right. So I was just going to say, adding to that, so when you look at those type of offerings, no matter what it is, whether it's the free or a paid for service, like you need to understand the username, right? The date of the breach, when did the actual breach occur? When was it first seen and last seen? So is it something 2 years old or 2 days old? Has it been seen other breaches? And most importantly, what's the password? Because if you don't understand the password, is that password risky? You can't really remediate it.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so a lot to think about. So bottom line, education, good password hygiene, and hopefully we won't see our credentials on any deep dark web or chat rooms that we don't want them to.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming today, Brett. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much, everyone else, for joining us today. So remember, be cyber safe. Thank you until next time. Bye.